This is Jamie, and I'm talking to Nicki Bannerman, radio presenter, podcast host, and vocal artist who lives in East Anglia. Welcome, Nicki.
Hello. Thank you for
Hello,
having
lovely.
me.
No, lovely having you here. So we're talking today a lot about podcasts, and obviously podcasting is a very fascinating business and one that's been growing, especially with everything going on at the minute. So can you tell us a bit more about it?
Definitely. Well, of course, some people either love podcasts or they don't actually know what they are. So, of course, it's audio as a treat for your ears, and it really is an intimate one-on-one experience. Essentially, podcasting combines the two words of broadcasting with the original iPod name that started really for internet radio as a podcast, because iPods were traditionally a device to play music on. Podcast started about 15 years ago, largely with comedy. So it's the word for downloadable audio, which can be played at your leisure on demand, like we're all familiar with on video. And it can be played at any time of day and suit your own interests. And it can be the radio shows you love. Many people don't realize that the podcast app is actually built into your phones. If you have an iPhone, if you look on your home screen, go to the app. If it's an iPhone, it's the pink microphone. You can search for radio shows or podcast genres that of interest to you. You get them free. They subscribe to them. They're all sent to your phone, to your inbox. And then anything you're passionate about, it's a way to entertain yourself. So the subjects are so wide ranging, from philosophy to women's issues, which I've done a number of, or history, true crime, whatever it is you're into, fashion or travel, and we'll talk a bit about vanilla a bit later on. It's all there.
Yeah. And it's easy to listen to, isn't it? I mean, I always listen to some in the cars or when I'm cooking and stuff. So they're always nice to have in the background, aren't they?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, that's what's exciting about the podcasting space, really, is that, you can listen to them whatever you're doing. The industry has grown so much daily, which is what makes it so exciting. And although video has obviously been popular for years with YouTube and Netflix, and downloadable stream content, audio can be listened to, as you say, when you're doing other things. You can download radio shows or podcasts, Bluetooth them and listen to them in your car, or Bluetooth download them before you go on a walk. Or they used to be obviously really popular for half an hour shows when people are commuting, but now people are from home. It's a half an hour walk or a drive. Driving was the most popular, but now it might even be walking. I don't know what's happened since lockdown. I'm not sure, but as you say, yes, while you're cooking, it's even in America, it's growing in popularity while you're at the dentist, would you believe? And I've actually got swimming headphones, so you can listen to podcasts while you're swimming or learn a language or something while you're actually, meditating in the water, as long as you don't drown.
So what was your background to get into kind of podcasting, which is a fairly new medium?
I wouldn't say I fell into it, but I've been lucky enough to work in marketing production for the entertainment industry, for my first career in TV, music and video, when all of those formats were changing. And I actually worked for Blockbuster when Netflix offered to buy them, but that was a whole other story. And when new magazines and CDs and magazines were coming out, I was involved with that. And I'm a journalist. I've worked in publishing with written and spoken word. But now it's the renaissance for audio. The BBC launched the Sounds app and hired a commissioner of programming for podcasts. And radio stations have their own apps for on-demand listening. But, my background was, because I worked in entertainment, I've always loved radio. But I just developed a passion for radio, and I thought I really want to get into radio. So about 7 years ago, I volunteered at my local community radio station, actually, and worked for 3 years, ended up doing the weekend breakfast show. I was a newsreader for 3 years for them. I got lots of training through the BBC in London and Manchester. And in fact, I wanted to work for the BBC when I was 15, so it's always been a bit of a thing for me. So I actually produced a podcast helping women in broadcast for the BBC and worked with Jane Garvey and, all of the incredible women broadcasters, Sophie Glover and Kirsty Young. And so it really gave me the bug to want to get into radio. And when I went actually to one of the BBC conferences in Manchester, people were talking about podcasts, and I was saying, what actually is that then? And I just became a bit curious, being a journalist, and just started discovering it, and then realised, actually, I was right at the infant stage 7 years ago. of it happening, and then started to help women in broadcast, and then women generally. Before there were really any women's podcasts around, I launched mine 4 years ago. So actually, it's I've been hopefully riding on the crest of the podcasting wave.
So what you said about, you know, podcasts becoming bigger and becoming more of a wave, kind of how has lockdown changed that?
Well, gosh, it has. I mean, people can't get enough podcasts now, which is brilliant. You know, and loads of people have got their own. You know, opinion leaders, even like Michelle Obama, broadcasters, loads of people have got their own. But lockdown has brought a new normal that has impacted all walks of life all over the world. It's changed all of our thinking. I think our mindsets, our well-being, our habits, our behaviour. I think advertisers' budgets have been halved, and obviously people aren't doing what they were doing then. They're not really watching TV anymore with ads on because they're binging on Netflix to cheer themselves up. They're not going out to the cinema because they're closed. They're not commuting and seeing the adverts that they would normally see. And some magazines, obviously not yours, but some magazine deadlines are so long that the story has changed by the time the story comes out as to actually what's relevant and topical and what's happening. So podcasts are more immediate, like radio. They tell you the news today, the topicality. They can tell your story now. They can change your story tomorrow. And the immediacy of it, I think, has become really relevant. Plus the fact, you know, we're always on our phones. Everyone's at home, or if they're not, they've got their phone with them. And you know, advertising budgets have changed. You can target people straight to their phones. Podcast content is topical, bespoke, relevant, immediate. It's straight into your ears in the most intimate way. That when you've got headphones on, you know, I now go for a walk in the park, and when you've got headphones on, whether you're listening to music or a story, you really feel like someone's there with you. It's a really intimate experience, different to radio actually, which is normally a more public group listen to activity. But so podcasts have changed in lockdown, and I can include a brand name on my radio or podcast shows, you know, as a sponsor saying brought to you by Vanilla, for instance, or as a product placement in the show, which is really big in America, people like Russell Brand, where you, instead of interrupting it with an ad, you talk about a product as part of the show in an authentic, lively, funny way. I mean, the brand has to trust you in terms of you can say whatever you like about it. But it's more meaningful, and I think brands are enjoying it more because actually you're saying, oh, what do you think about this strange product or whatever? And you can talk about it with the guests. So it's quite interesting. And obviously you can help people tell their stories. You know, everyone's working from home more, traveling less. I think lockdown, it has, you know, it's changed advertisers' thoughts to saying, right, we can actually target our listeners on podcasts to reach them. And it's changed the fact that people want to listen to podcasts because they want some escapism, and they want someone to talk to them and sort of self-soothe, really, don't they?
I mean, especially right now with everything going on, isolating and stuff like that, I think having just that voice in your kind of ear can sometimes make you feel a little bit less.
Really, isn't it, in a way? And actually, I interviewed Louise Minchin from BBC Breakfast TV recently, actually, and bizarrely, her and I had both had, you know, health and well-being is my passion, but I've had a few health setbacks myself in pandemic, including 2 operations mid-pandemic. So I'm on crutches and she was on crutches, and I was interviewing her through the computer, which I'm actually on now, you know, and we just couldn't stop laughing, even though we're in lockdown and we're in this desperate situation, and everyone wanted to know where she was, and people were getting really stressed. And I think it was that familiarity that their whole day has changed, but they just wanted her in the morning, was the only thing that was their routine. And I think people are craving comfort more than anything. You know, if it's not comfort, you know, drinking or eating or something, it's a podcast I think can really help. And radio can help because I've been lucky enough actually to be on BBC Suffolk 7 times in lockdown, and I did a thought for the day every day where I was doing a sort of inspiration and on health and well-being to help people think differently every day. And then I chose 5 pieces of music as well that related to how they might be feeling, and whether it was getting them to dance around the kitchen or reflect on their mood, or something to feel happier or upbeat, or something to go with that melancholy. And I really enjoyed it, you know, and I've been doing a lot more, you know, with the community, really, rather than travel to London. You know, we've all changed what we're doing, haven't we?
Yeah. So would you say that your work has changed for the better in lockdown?
Oh, definitely. I mean, bizarrely, before lockdown, I was working in PR and marketing as well as a producer and host for audio content creation. But my passion for audio's always been on health and wellbeing and giving others a voice. And in February, I was doing publicity for a uni student accommodation company on their wellbeing strategies. And then coronavirus hit around Chinese New Year. A lot of their students were Chinese, and that trauma of actually trying to help with the press and everything was really challenging. So I reflected, as everyone has, on what matters, what I wanted to spend my time doing. I was already working from home doing podcasting, so that didn't change much. That was quite helpful because I didn't, have that initial challenge. I was helping other people, set that up. But as my interest in health and well-being became more paramount and my health changed, and my personal health, I shifted into producing and presenting audio and content with a full-time focus on health and well-being and lifestyle, and collaborating with others to tell their stories, and how important actually everyone's mental health and well-being has been impacted massively. And people will have post-traumatic stress. And I've got, 2 teenagers myself. My daughter went, to university, and she got corona as soon as she got there. And, so I've been exposed and aware of actually how everyone is impacted, whether they're on their own or, mental well-being. And I've been on more radio shows in London and been asked to do more radio shows on health and well-being and more content, actually. And I'm actually training, with a personal qualification in empowerment coaching with health and well-being at the same time online. So I think it's just my passion has become more my focus, and my focus has become more my work in terms of actually really getting into what I love doing, and at the right time, really, I think.
So obviously people have changed over this lockdown, whether it be for the better or the worst. How have people's habits and behaviours affected advertising and podcasts? How are they now marketing themselves?
Gosh, well, I think businesses have become so much more innovative. They've had to diversify and really pivot to change with what society and cultural demands expect, really. And the growth of smartphones have changed the way people behave, and voice-activated devices, which I challenge my Alexa all the time. I think people are really enjoying that sort of interactive voice activity, whether it's in the car or at home. So people's habits have changed, and now you can talk to your audience straight into the palm of their hands, directly to their ears while they're on their phones. They're in their homes, listening to their favourite shows. They're loyal, so it's relevant. They want to hear it. It's more relevant to the young people who don't screen them out because it is more targeted. So it's amazing. You can reach people while they're on the move, cut through that noise and make a difference. Podcasts have been growing for years, as we said, led largely by America. Some incredible true crime series, such as one called Serial by News Channel, This American Life. I saw the guy that actually started that. I went to an interview of his in London. It's just phenomenal. It's had, a few years ago, it was like 400 million downloads. It's just phenomenal now. And Joe Rogan, who's just had $100 million exclusive buyout deal by Spotify. The Royals, Meghan and Harry, have got a content TV deal on Netflix and a podcast deal with Spotify. The big entertainment giants, who I used to work for a lot of those guys, they're involved with content makers and creators, digital storytelling. It's really high quality. I think in the UK, listenership is now 15 million people with a 33 million advertising expenditure, I think, with news and interviews is the most important. It's phenomenal. I read, I think in the US, they said it'd be $1.25 billion on advertising by the end of this year. And by 2025, it's going to be over $3 billion on advertising and podcasting. Wow. So it's, for something that's doubling the industry size in this climate is just phenomenal. And it's exciting to be in an industry that's growing at a time when so many things are just not, being really, really suffering. So it's good to be in something because customer lifestyles are changing. And actually, funnily, talking about countries, America and Spain are the biggest, but in fact, South Korea leads the way worldwide on podcasts, bizarrely. I think it's because so many of them have phones, and 70% of people there listen to podcasts. I think in America, 329 million people listen, but half of people in South Korea do. And I think it averages 7 a week. So people, they can listen to lots of them. So advertisers and brands are jumping on the bandwagon. There's so many creative and dynamic brands in East Anglia, from the coast to Norfolk, with their own amazing, fascinating stories to tell and share. There's so many opportunities, and audio can be on a podcasting platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google, or on Alexa, which I'm on all of those platforms, or people can use it on their own websites or social media. And I'm collaborating with various local companies to tell their stories. I'm working with a new app, actually, and several audio commissions next year, including launching the new Vanilla podcast in the new year, which is very exciting, that we'll be working on very soon.
So to jump on to the next question, do you think lockdown has brought any benefits to others' wellbeing?
Well, yes. I mean, although it's been incredibly challenging, and obviously, Christmas has been cancelled, this will obviously come out in the new year. We've all been challenged to the max, not just short term. Someone said to me the other day, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you think, so I've been saying to my teams, we've just got to get to that finishing line, and this is the hardest bit. And all of our resilience and determination and ability to cope with our own mental well-being has just been challenged off the scale. But I think we have found some solace in the madness. We've slowed down, we've reflected on what our values and what's important in our life. We've changed our stress levels. We've taken up walking and bizarre sports and wild swimming. Some of my friends have done, and I've even been in the sea because I couldn't go in. So people are doing things that are healthier, and people are looking different. They're looking healthier, and the love of the outdoors, which I think has helped people realise being outside actually is one of the only saving graces that we do have, and not to take anything for granted. Hold the ones we love closer. I think we all took too much for granted. Just seeing friends and family, everyone copes differently. It depends on their coping strategies, what they've been through in their own lives. Some completely freaked out and lost the plot. Some have just sailed on in denial. Whatever. I've said to people, however you're dealing with it, it's fine, because that's what we have to come back to. It's all different. None of us are in control of anything. Just enjoying today, I think, is what matters. Going with the flow. We've changed our lifestyles to avoid burnout and stress, which can only be a good thing. We never had any downtime. Now we've got too much downtime, too much togetherness. But I think the nice thing, the fusion of who we are hasn't got that divide of the work person and the home person. Now, we're working in our homes. I'm lying on my bed. You're in your own home. I've interviewed people in their homes. We've had, screening, streaming of people, celebrities in their homes, and we've been curious. What kind of sofa have they got, or what slippers have they got on, or we're a nosy nation. We love knowing everything about everyone, and they become more real. They haven't got any work either. We haven't got any work. They're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We are all in it together. We're all human. So laughing aside, it's made me focus on what I want to do, to be more local, be more, collaborate with you guys and lots of other people in the region, and BBC Suffolk has been brilliant, because I was going to London a lot more and not looking on my own doorstep actually about the amazing opportunities. And that's what people, I think, have to diversify in that, and creating great content and working with great people. I think the way that certainly the hospitality business in East Anglia has changed, the winter gardens, the money they've had to spend to make those screens and outdoor enchanting spaces, it's been incredible. And with their business going down, as a survival strategy, it's making us more European. And when it reopens, all of those spaces are just incredible places now for others to enjoy when it does come back. Yeah, so I'd mentioned that I worked on BBC Suffolk 7 times, which I love doing. I've also been interviewed by them about a podcast I host, present and founded, the Influential Women podcast, which helps people with diversity, health and life challenges to thrive and survive. And actually in lockdown, I changed the philosophy of that from business people, because I thought no one will want to hear about how incredibly well and wealthy some business people are doing when they're all dying on their feet. So I changed the guest to include a Buddhist mindfulness coach who took people outside to help them. She was really inspiring, and included a little meditation session on one of my podcasts actually, and a local trauma counsellor who Katrina Love, who's helped a lot of people with anxiety that they're going through at the moment. And I also interviewed a lady in East Anglia who's been held, she was in prison for 7 years, and what it felt like to be in captivity, because obviously Terry Waite lives in this region as well, people that have experienced what it's like, because this feels like you're in captivity, but they're saying, but you've got so much stuff, you've got all the food you want, all the entertainment, you've got all the TV you've got, just deal with it, is what one of the lady I interviewed who'd been in prison for 7 years said. So you just think, okay, it comes back to those coping skills. So it was interesting. And I also did a podcast for a local East Anglian restaurant group, actually, Chestnut, who you probably know as well, who was supporting the NHS by raising meals to deliver to the vulnerable and local hospices and key workers. So I did a podcast for them in lockdown, and I've been on several London radio stations to help with health and wellbeing. I've also been asked to do a new radio talk show on health and wellbeing, which I'm about to launch on digital radio. And obviously your lovely podcast, which we've called the Vanilla Pod, which we thought is just has to be called that for a bit of fun, to reflect the lifestyle content of the magazine. So we look forward to sharing more stories about the region on that for next year.
So I always say a career like this, no day is kind of ever the same, ever. So what has your career in radio broadcast and podcast kind of entailed? What is a day-to-day life of your job?
Wow, well, as I say, I'm passionate about wellbeing, more and more so with lockdown, I think, than ever before. I enjoy giving, the underrepresented a voice, because nothing is ever the same every day, particularly now. We have to enjoy every day, don't we? I think I just enjoy what, things I'm drawn to on a daily basis, and the guests that just sort of come into my life, through PR, some of the incredible women I've met, or through podcasts or through broadcast, and just sort of getting the most out of talking to those people about their stories and helping others cope with their life by listening to other stories, I think has been really helpful. I mean, as I mentioned, I have produced podcasts for the BBC, and that helped women get into broadcast by hearing other mentors and incredible broadcasters' journeys, really. And I've also had more access to celebrities and authors and interesting guests, because they've all been at home, and I thought, come on, you're not busy, really.
You're not doing anything.
I know you're not going anywhere. Exactly. So the world of opportunities opened up with remote working and technology. I've interviewed high flyers. I've interviewed someone from the New York Times the other day. Their PRs contacted me and asked me to interview her on gender equality and politics, around the election. And Louise Minchin, I talked about, the key anchor. So, it just makes it, again, more human, which I love.
So we've obviously dropped hints throughout this conversation about a little thing called Vanilla Pod.
Exactly.
So can you tell us a bit about it, about what it's going to be about?
Yes. Well, that's a really exciting opportunity for next year. So thank you, because I recently met up with you and the Mansion House media team. So I'm thrilled to be representing you, both producing and host presenting this new content platform. I believe the article in the magazine will have a QR code, barcode link, which can take you straight to the audio version to listen to this as a podcast example. The new podcast, as we say, will be called the Vanilla Pod. It'll include interviews with inspiring and interesting male and female guests throughout the region. So I'm excited about sharing those future stories, collaborating with a lot of partners and in the region. So listen out for that, everyone. And thank you for having me as a guest doing that. I'm really looking forward to it. There's so many amazing, inspiring companies, brands, entertainment venues, festivals, theatres, when they do all open up, and some of the guests they bring, they're of international scale. Absolutely. And to have access to bring their stories to the region and across, all of your genres and lifestyle and beauty and fashion and interesting, inspiring women and men, and obviously Manila as well, which is, really important, particularly in lockdown. Men have started to talk, and that is amazing because, and Loose Women did Loose Men for International Men's Day in November, and I've walked past men in the park and stopped because they've actually been talking about emotions or relationships or whatever. And I thought, I have never, ever heard men talking about anything other than sport and whatever. And I think that's great. You know, I think they should be, because why the heck shouldn't they? They're suffering too. And if they don't talk, you know, it's a really dangerous road. So I think that's brilliant. Your you know, Manila timing is really topical, is really important for men and women to talk, to listen, to share, to collaborate, and, you know, to any of your partners and brands within the region, you know, welcome to have a chat and share their stories. Love to hear.
I think it's a really nice kind of development to, you know, bring in men, because men do feel too, they're not isolated. They have the
we're inclusive, you know, diverse, you know, from the magazine, from the podcast, you know, definitely it's you know, and I want to hear their stories too.
So it's going to kind of be for everyone then, isn't it?
Definitely for everyone. More the merrier.
So how can people get in touch with you or find your podcast if they want to have a listen?
Oh, thank you. Well, you can download the Influential Women podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts, and a whole load of other, Deezer and Castbox and Comcast and all sorts of other amazing Stitcher apps. And even on Alexa, you say, can you play the Influential Women podcast? And actually it does. And I think, wow, look. But predominantly people still, you know, it's largely about 70% through Apple. People listen generally to podcasts nowadays. And then Google and Spotify are obviously, you know, growing their market share. So you go to their app, you literally type in the Influential Women podcast or whatever podcast you're into, and it comes up, you subscribe for free, and then it's delivered straight to your inbox. So that's on the podcast. And for me personally, you can find my website, www.Nicki Bannerman, Nicki with an I, that is Nicki, Bannerman, BANNERMAN, radio.co.uk for any audio, radio and podcast commissions. Or you can reach out to me on my Twitter feed at NickiHBC, or my Insta feed, Nicki_Bannerman. And of course, through the Vanilla Magazine editorial team, if you want to collaborate with the new Vanilla Pod, the Vanilla Pod podcast coming soon in the new year. So thank you for that.